Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick. We're here to talk about the offense from that great win against the Bengals on, let's see, it's Thursday night, I guess now. It's a weird week anytime we have a night game period, but especially on a Thursday night. And here to do it with us is Childs Walker of the Baltimore Sun. Childs, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Ken. Thanks for having me back. And we certainly have an interesting game to talk about in both good ways and bad.
Yeah. Definitely some things that are going to suck. Let's start with some positive news. The crowd noise. I think the Ravens have kind of mildly inflated the penalty total that was directly related to this, but the crowd is as loud as I've can remember it. There's a few games where they've been exceptionally loud in Ravens history, but this was one of the really special ones.
Yeah, and look. The impact was right there for everybody to see. I mean, the Bengals took 2 timeouts in the first half that they didn't want to take because of the crowd noise, which is exactly what the Ravens have been calling for all week. I think it's the special thing about those blackout, night games that everybody kind of gets up for in a different way. They wear the all black uniforms. They're kind of trying to hype the crowd all week long to get people, ready for the moment, and the crowd delivered.
It looked like a 1919 style baseball crowd you're seeing, where you see those things where it's all men and they're all wearing suits and whatnot, and it wasn't all men, but everyone was wearing black, and it was really very cool that people take it seriously. It doesn't always happen. The few Bengals fans really were specks in the crowd, but I thought it was very impressive how they got everybody dressed, and then the light show and whatnot was kind of cool.
I think that's part of the reason why, at least several times a year, when they're about to play a primetime game, you will hear John Harbaugh, when he talks to us, specifically sort of lobby for them to have more primetime home games, because I think they really like it. I think they get up for it, and they think it's an advantage. So I mean, it's not an accident that he brings that up multiple times a season.
Harbaugh is very crafty too, because he really wants the Thursday home games. He knows how valuable those are. If you look at the one-loss records, being home at Thursday is the bomb. You want that,
and a big division game in that situation. I mean, that's absolutely what you want. Yes.
Yeah. We'd like to have a home Thursday game every Thanksgiving against the Steelers, and make it a traditional, but it's a home always for us. Yeah. No, that'd be great. The light show that was not as appreciated and caused at least one stoppage of play, might have been 2, because there were 2 weird timeouts during the game with those drones overhead. Did you guys get any notification of that while you were in the press box?
The only notification that we got was not formal, but where I sit in the press box, which is kind of all the way to the right side, by the kind of closest to the coaches' boxes, kind of right beside the Ravens PR people, and the people who work for the league and are sort of keeping track of what's going on in the game and relaying that to the people running the TV broadcasts are sitting right there. So I heard them say, I mean, of course, on the field, they said administrative delay, but I heard them say, it's a drone, feel free to take a 1.5-minute TV break or what. So we knew from overhearing them, but it was not presented to us as any kind of formal information. So, I mean, we were, flying semi-blind like most people on that one.
Like the drone, probably, yeah.
Like the drone, right.
That's really interesting to hear. I heard the question asked with Harbaugh was at the podium after the game, and I wondered, what they told you guys. But it's just really weird when a timeout occurs for no reason, nobody's hurt, and obviously there were injuries in this game. I guess that has to be the next topic: is what do you think of these hip drop tackles, and kind of what did you take away from Harbaugh's response at the podium also?
Well, I think that they were in a raw place about it emotionally because Mark Andrews is so important to the team. I mean, you saw Lamar's reaction on the field. I mean, he knew right away that it was bad just by, seeing the way that Mark was reacting on the field. I mean, so you could see how disturbed he was right away, the way he sort of let his helmet fall to the turf. I mean, so I think that was still there right after the game. I mean, they didn't try to pretend that. I mean, usually when you get even a significant injury in the NFL, guys will immediately start talking about, next man up. That's just the nature of what we do. Mm-hmm. We're used to this. We'll soldier on. And they did say that, but no one tried to pretend that this wasn't a big deal. They know how important he is to what they do schematically on offense. They know how important he is just because of his unique connection with Lamar. And he's one of the most important guys in the locker room. I mean, he just brings this level of week to week intensity and professionalism that, being behind the scenes and being in that room all the time, it just never turns off. I mean, it's a real thing. And I mean, it means something to the other guys around him. So it's a big deal, and they were processing it as a big deal. So I think, I think that was part of how they talked about the play. My sense from talking to the players is that most of them didn't really think that Logan Wilson was playing dirty. The bottom line is that is a legal hit in the game right now. I mean, I don't think he was looking to hurt Mark Andrews. I think he was looking to prevent a touchdown, and he used one of the tools that's currently available to him. I think it's a very valid debate to say maybe, given all the other things that they do to try to protect players, you try to legislate that out of the game. I think that's probably something to take a serious look at. But I don't think that Logan Wilson crossed a line and tried to cause an injury in the game. And my sense was that most of the guys on the team didn't see it that way either.
I think there was a player at least quoted like that, but there was also a league official, I believe, quoted as saying the chance of injury is 25 times as high. He actually said 2,500% higher, so it might mean 26 times as high, but 25 times as high is, with the hip drop tackle as opposed to other plays. That's a very good reason to legislate it out of the game, I would say, if they can do it. But it's going to have to take real teeth to do it, because a penalty is not enough. They've proven that for years with things like roughing the passer penalties and whatnot, that, Bernard Pollard gets a 15-yard penalty, but Tom Brady's out for the season, kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, you start to bring heavy fines or suspensions or whatever into it. Yeah. That is what it would probably take. I mean, if you make it an automatic 15-yard penalty, that probably has some effect, especially if it's well enforced. I mean, I do think over time we've seen that have an effect with roughing the passer. I mean, you certainly don't see as many quarterbacks getting body slammed with a 340-pound defensive tackle on top of them. I mean, that's not a common play in the game anymore, whereas it was at one time. So, but you're right. It's not going to be overnight, even if the penalties are stiff. So it'll be a very interesting thing to see.
Yeah. All right. Well, hopefully the Ravens can actually soldier on through the Mark Andrews thing. One question I had, and I just want to read this response, because this is Twitter, by the way, at its best. So the question I asked was, it's a general medical population here. We have a great medical community here in Baltimore. Is Mark Andrews' recovery impacted by his type 1 diabetes? And I got this answer, and it came from Haroon Ahmad, who's a neurologist at the University of Maryland. And he says, hi, Ken, longtime fan listener. I'm a neurologist, but diabetes is widespread enough that we are pretty well all familiar with its complications. Diabetes has to be fairly uncontrolled to impact surgical recovery times. That includes injury recovery times, he later goes on to say. Judging by the fact that Mark checks his blood glucose multiple times during each game, he likely has tight controls on his levels. So I'd say it's doubtful his diabetes will affect the recovery potential. The injury itself would need a hyper-specialized orthopedic physician to comment on. Hope that helps. Thanks for all the great work. Anyway, I just wanted to say that really is Twitter at its best. There's so much sniping and whatnot, but it's great to have someone give not only a great, thorough response, but a very qualified response in terms of what he's qualified to talk about in there. I just really appreciate that, Doctor. And thanks for sending me that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I had not even thought about it from that angle.
Yeah, I this isn't anything I know personally or anything, but I remember seeing on an old MASH episode that there was a guy who had diabetes and he was having trouble healing. So I just wondered. All right, loss of Odell Beckham late in this game. Is there any further news on that at this point? I know Harbaugh's presser won't be for a couple of days still, right?
Yeah, Monday. The vibe after the game is that that's not serious. I mean, that's what Harbaugh said when he talked to us. I mean, Odell stayed out and, did the stage, interview thing after the game. I don't think he would have done that if he was seriously hurt. He talked to us at his locker after the game, didn't have any kind of rap on his shoulder or anything unusual. Didn't seem overly concerned about it. So, I mean, I think we've seen with Odell, he's a guy who's he's going to get a little banged up now. I mean, that doesn't seem to be it seems like he's not going to go more than a few weeks without some minor thing here or there, and you hope they stay minor. Seems like that's the case with this one, and especially given the way he started to play, he's become a much bigger part of the offense, and I'm sure we're going to talk about him later, and that'll only be more of the case with Andrews out.
Yeah, exactly what I was thinking. So they got through 3 tough opponents, 2 home wins, 3 out of 6 the rest of the way at home. So they bled off their home field advantage these last 3 weeks, but to good effect, I would say, winning 2 of those 3. How do you feel about their place in the division right now with Pittsburgh kind of nipping at them with a much easier schedule?
I mean, they're in the strongest position in the division, partly because they're the best team and they have the best record. It certainly helps. I mean, you never root for other teams starting quarterbacks to be out for the season. But if you're a Ravens fan, I mean, certainly the Bengals seem in real peril of not even really contending for a playoff spot now. It would be I think really a Herculean climb given their schedule for them even to be in the mix by the end of the season. The Browns, their defense is such a dependable element, and they've essentially been playing without the best version of Deshaun Watson most weeks anyway, even when he's been playing. So, could certainly see them staying in contention, and their schedule is also a little bit easier. Wouldn't be surprised if they're right there for a playoff spot. Wouldn't think they have a real strong chance of winning the division, and most of the projection systems would agree with that. I've almost given up trying to figure out Pittsburgh because they just seem to defy reason. I mean, we've all heard the stats. I mean, they've been outgained every game this season, yet they're 6-3. I mean, they beat the Ravens in just maddening fashion. Yep. As you said, there's as you said, their schedule the rest of the way is very favorable. You can easily see them getting to 10, 11 wins, even without necessarily playing any better than they've played. So, I mean, the Ravens are going to have to keep the pedal down a little bit. I mean, they've put themselves in very good position. I think, if we had laid out this scenario at the start of the season, people would have been very happy with 8-3 and a divisional lead going into this stretch where they're going to have some time to rest and heal up. So they're solidly in pole position, but I mean, they're certainly not home free, and there's a decent chance that season finale is going to be an important game. Hosting the Pittsburghs at M&T.
Yeah, it's a great point. It's something you do not want is to have the last game of the season be an important game. In fact, I've often said that playing a good team in the last week of the season, now you always play divisional teams, so it's not as big an advantage as it was before. Playing a good team is usually a good thing because that good team may not have anything to play for and they'd be maybe looking to take a week off. The Ravens, boy, the way I just have to believe they're going to be looking to take a week off if they can in that final week. Now, they won't be able to do it if the 2 or 1 seed is on the line because those two things are too incrementally valuable to a 3 or a 4. But boy, I'd love to see them be able to take that week off. We've been through a constant set of tests for the offensive tackles on this team. Ridiculously talented set of pass rushers in the AFC North right now, including the Ravens' big 3 and the remainder of their guys. Can the Ravens make it through the rest of the season with McCary at left tackle may not be the rest of the season, but for until Ronnie gets back, what they have in terms of backup talent?
I mean, first of all, I do think we'll probably see Ronnie back. My guess would be if I just had to guess, and again, don't take this as reporting. This is my guess based on sort of vibes. Yeah, I would say I would be surprised if we see him on Sunday, but I would not be surprised if we see him in the first game back after the bye. That would kind of be my guesstimate on that. And then that that pushes McCary back to the role that he's great at, which is being the swing guy and being a guy that you feel pretty good if he has to jump into a game. Now, obviously, they only have one divisional game left. So yes, they have TJ Watt looming, the last week of the season, but I have to say I have not looked at each one of their opponents from now on from that lens. Obviously, the 49ers have a very talented front seven. I mean, that's one that sticks out. But there may be some other teams in there that might be a little bit of a later week if I'm thinking about it. So maybe they get a little bit of a respite, but we know they're going to be facing talented rushers when you get to the playoffs anyway. So I mean, it's of concern. I mean, one interesting thought I had in this game is, in some ways, do they miss Moses more when he's out than they miss Stanley when he's out? I don't know if you've looked at that or thought about it from that point of view, but that was a thought that I had coming out of this game.
I will tell you that Moses had a much better year than Stanley has. Stanley's right. Let me just say this in terms of raw score for Stanley, because it's really been a disappointing year. But Stanley's raw score for the entire year is .62, which probably is about .16 or .17 lower than he is in a normal year. And so in a normal year, like 22 was probably a normal year, the new normal, I'll call it, where he would have ranked a B for the entire season, or right about there. And Moses for the entire year is .77. He's right up there with the challenging to be one of the best linemen on the team. Zeitler's been a little better, and Linderbaum's been about as good as Zeitler right now. They're in very tight competition for the best lineman on the team right now. So the play of Moses has been, just a godsend, and thank goodness, because they have to have someone for 2024 who's booked already. I already think the draft need at offensive tackle is just looming like an obelisk over all other needs come next April.
No, I certainly agree with that. I do still think that there's more. I do think the ceiling is higher with Stanley than it is with McCary. I mean, we've seen McCary, and we certainly saw it in this game. I mean, there's moments, when he's one-on-one with one of these elite edge guys that you were just talking about, where he does struggle a little bit. I mean, now I thought they ultimately schemed well enough that Hendrickson didn't just take over the game and ruin the game. Looked like he might there for a minute, in those 3 unsuccessful drives they had after scoring on the initial drive. So they've been pretty good about dealing with these things well enough. But as not up to a standard as Stanley has been, I still think you want him more than you don't want him out there.
Yes, I completely agree. I mean, this was almost true even of Villanueva, who was awful at left tackle. Is with the tackle situation the Ravens had, it was otherwise a practice squad tackle was the other player, and that's such a drop off at left tackle that you end up with, you can end up with a much worse situation even than that. All right, let's move on and talk about the game a little more. They outsnapped the Bengals 60-59 in this game. This was a little known big time result for the Ravens in this game, because very late news, and I really want to get your take on this. Broderick Washington was inactive for the game, completely unexpected to me. And the first time the Ravens have gone with only 4 defensive linemen the entire year, which doesn't seem like something they would do with Williams having a lot of the tackling problems he'd had the week before. Do you happen to know, was he ill or something, or was there a late injury that occurred that you're aware of?
I am not aware of either of those things. He was not on the injury report during the week. We got no word that he was ill. I don't think that. Yeah, John Harbaugh was not asked that after the game, so I would imagine someone will ask that Monday. What went into that decision. My read on it was simply that they didn't expect the Bengals to run the ball a whole lot, and they don't think that Broderick has played as well as they hoped he would this year. I mean, I think it's, Occam's razor tells me that's the simplest explanation, and that's what I would go with as of now.
Okay, well, that's fair enough. The Ravens, because of the fact that they have no surplus outside linebackers, can't really kick people inside anymore, or they don't anyway. Let's put it that way. Even in a game where they were shorthanded on the defensive line, so it's very surprising. It was extremely surprising to me. I would have said the Occam's razor for me would have been that he was sick. He had the flu or something. He didn't feel like he could go, but I'm really interested to hear that. So I'll look for that specifically on Monday.
Yeah.
3 out of 4 in the red zone. And this is a different Ravens team this year. Now 30 of 46 on the season, 65.2%. That's up from 44% last year for the entire year. And it's not too far beneath the NFL leaders who are in the low 70s. They're 4th in the NFL this year. That median is around 53%. Right now. Do you guys have discussions about what's good in the red zone, or what the Ravens think works about the red zone this year as opposed to last year?
have not heard the coaches make the specific comparison to last year. They tend not to like to do that. I think the feeling is that their philosophy is very much that the best way to score in the red zone is to be able to run efficiently. That's ultimately what you want to do. And they've done that, right? I mean, Gus Edwards has been tremendously efficient there. Lamar obviously creates problems and things that the defense has to be aware of that a lot of quarterbacks don't, which, opens things up to some degree. And, both of those guys have been very efficient in getting the ball over the goal line without having to put it in the air. And I think that's, if I had to boil down their philosophy, I mean, that's what it is. I mean, they want to be able to power the ball over the goal line. That they think that's the way to go. And they think they're doing that better this year than they have in the past.
All right. That's, it's incredible to say that with, Roman's offense being what it was, this point of attack offense is having trouble punching the ball in, but certainly is borne out in some ways by the statistics. And, the Ravens have been better at the pass. Series success rate, 78.6% against the Bengals, 22 out of 28. That's excellent. Part of that is not turning the ball over because you certifiably end a series every time you turn the ball over. But they only got I think half their first down, 6 out of 12 on the game. So a good game for that. They're not quite at the league lead in that category. They're in the low 70s, and the league leaders, Miami, Kansas City, are in the high 70s. But still a good year for that, and greatly improved from last year.
Another interesting thing that we saw in this game was they took several play action deep shots on first down. Now they didn't. The hit rate still isn't what they would want, but I mean, I still think you want to see them doing that. And they didn't miss by much on the first two that they took. I mean, I think Lamar missed Odell by maybe 2 steps on the first one, and then the Taylor Britt, the Bengals D-back, made just a really nice play to bat the ball away from Bateman on what easily could have been a touchdown. I mean, Bateman had a step on him, and I think that was a really good throw. So I mean, those are the kind of first down risks you want to see them taking multiple times a game, and they were certainly set up to work, even if they didn't work in this game.
Yeah, it was good to see that, and you definitely want deep shots. Bateman been overthrown twice. It's good to see him come back to Bateman, who did have separation on that play. Just that much of an underthrown ball, and I agree with you. I think it was mostly just a fantastic play from Taylor Britt, who really laid out for that ball to get just a piece of it. No fourth down attempts in this game. I always think that's a good thing when you're playing a non-peer foe, which is what the Bengals became after they lost Burrow in this game. You don't want to take a lot of risks that heap up your chance of winning or losing the game into fewer plays and thus fewer big bets. It always is good to me when the Ravens are avoiding that against lesser teams. And given the way the Ravens have played this year, I mean, almost every team has been a lesser team. Right. Even the Detroit Lions, they went for it 6 times on fourth down, and 6 I think it was 6. And the Ravens didn't, of course. Actually, I think they went for it on 4th and 1, and they had that great touchdown run by Lamar early on. But they've been really good about taking risks appropriate to their relative standing to the other team this year.
And I'm not even sure there was a 4th down call that was particularly close in this game. Was there? There's not one that's coming to mind where I was really wondering if they were going to go for it or not.
Yeah, they didn't have like a plus 4th and 2 or 4th and 3 somewhere. So I don't think there was a close one.
Right.
How about we talk about Lamar a little bit? We can start out with some statistics, but you want to give any overall thoughts before we jump into some of the various pass rush metrics?
Sure. It was actually interesting to me. When I went back and watched the game yesterday, I think he actually played better than I thought he played watching it live. Watching it live, my sense was that his vision was a little bit off on more possessions than I thought, that he maybe struggled with pressure, or I thought he was struggling with pressure more than I think he actually did when I went back and watched the game. I thought he actually played a pretty efficient game, and some of the throws that looked routine to me while watching live, I thought he made really good reads and controlled the field with his eyes, and then really zipped the ball in to back him on a couple of those. So it was a strong game for him, I would say, overall, especially in context, the opponent, the fact he's playing, a lot of the game on a tender ankle. You would have to put this down as one of his plus performances for the season.
Yeah, I would too. I just, I'm not trying to pick on Mike Preston. Great guy, but I think he gave Lamar a C+ for this game with his 121 passer rating or whatever it was. And I'm like, I don't know what you want. And when I see Lamar putting the kind of zip he does on those intermediate throws, that's right. Lamar at his best. You're seeing him throw lasers in the middle of the field. He knows what he's doing. And a lot of the yak is actually created by Lamar. It's hitting those receivers in stride. It's Beckham on a slant, taking the ball for an extra 20 yards because the ball is right on his hands where it needs to be. And that's where it's been the last couple of weeks. He's thrown, a couple good slants to Beckham that have really gone for some significant distance. I got some pass rush numbers here. So the Bengals rushed 5+ only 5 times. So they really did not blitz Lamar very often in the traditional sense of blitz being defined. So Lamar was 3 of 4 on those plays for 25 yards, and not particularly good or bad, with 1 of the sacks. 4-man pass rush. This is where he feasted 22 pass plays there for 186 yards, 8.5 yards per throw. They tried a 3-man rush twice, 18.5 yards per throw. So just obviously sample size there at issue with a 37-yard play. I thought that was really interesting in terms of the Bengals still really wanting to stick to the 4-man rush as part of their DNA, have eyes on Lamar as the way to beat him. It was definitely the way to beat Joe Flacco back in the day. Joe had a lot of trouble dealing with 7-man zone defenses with a semi-effective 4-man rush, but it just does not seem as useful against Lamar.
If it had been you, if you had been Lou Anarumo, would you have blitzed more? I think he's done pretty well against the blitz this year. So that's not an automatic win either, right?
No, I would agree. You almost have to turn off one of your interior guys and make him a ungreenlit rusher, or even drop him to zone, because once you de-greenlight the guy, you've made him completely ineffective. If you drop him to zone, if you think about Michael Pierce, the times he's been dropped to zone this year, he's not running anybody's quarterback down. If that happens. But the Cincinnati and Cleveland specifically have had a lot of success and ability, frankly, to lay injuries on Lamar. And it was JOK one year, and it was Wilson last night or Thursday night, when they get after Lamar even before he leaves the pocket. So basically, they see the pocket breaking, or it's about to break, and they're off like a dart, and with fast linebackers. In the case of other teams, the rule in general is that the short side zone linebacker on the side of the boot, on the side where the pocket's being left, automatically vacates his zone responsibilities and rushes directly at the quarterback when he leaves the pocket. Well, and I know that, Childs. I'm just saying it for the other folks on air here, but that's one thing that I think these two teams have pulled the trigger early on that and been very effective doing it with faster linebackers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Although I didn't think their contain on him was great on Thursday, meaning Cincinnati's contain on Lamar. I thought he was, especially again after those unproductive, couple of drives early in the game, I thought he was able to either move around in the pocket or move around outside the pocket and extend plays and manage the game pretty effectively without them really turning the tables on him that often.
Yeah, he definitely did a great job with that. That really showed up in the time to throw of 3.58 seconds. It's way north of the rest of the year. I don't think he's had another game even close to that. Even the game with the Aguilar 9-second TD, his was still in the mid threes. It might have been about 3.35 or 3.45 or something. But this was really ridiculous. And I think there was that TD to Bateman.
It was the TD to Bateman, and then there was a play where he had like 10 or 11 seconds. And
Aaron Rodgers' season is officially over, but yours has just begun at MyBookie. NFL, college ball, and a brand new cash-out system gives you options to bet and win all season long. First 2 legs of your parlay hit, cash out early and place another bet, or let it ride for a chance at an even bigger payday. Join us at MyBookie for an entire season filled with daily odd boost, same-game parlays, and huge prize pool contests. Right now, MyBookie has a no-strings-attached cash bonus that lets you deposit and withdraw quick. Use the promo code RAVENS on your first deposit of $50 or more, and you can receive up to $200 in cash instantly credited to your MyBookie account. That's promo code RAVENS to claim your cash bonus now. You can bet anything, anytime, anywhere, only with MyBookie.
Didn't ultimately find a receiver that pulled that average up as well.
Yeah. It's I don't have I never have heard how that's officially calculated by Next Gen, if they have a cap of say 6 seconds or something on a play and they don't.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah.
Ample time and space, BOQ, and pressure. So this gets to some of this other stuff. 11 ample time and space opportunities, 38%. That's really good, by the way, for the Ravens to give him this many. Completed 6 of 10 for 85 yards, 7.7 yards per play. Not particularly good there. You really would like that number to be up at 10 yards per play. But where he was exceptional, when the ball was out quickly, he went 7 of 8 for 89 yards, 11.1 yards per play. That's really outstanding. Normally that might be in about the 5 range. And the Ravens know it well because that's most of Burrow's throws against them are these ball out quick, usually screen pass types, occasionally a slant, but something very short that doesn't have a lot of A dot to it. And you're relying on yak from your receiver most of the time.
Well, and then those numbers would be even more impressive if the Zay 68-yard touchdown had been wiped out by the
BS holding
penalty. Yes, exactly. That was one of the more egregious calls of the year, I think.
Yeah, I have really just been on fire with how Keaton Mitchell is playing, as I'm sure everybody has. But you know, even tweeting after his first couple of runs in that first game against the Lions. Actually, the Lions, he just took the one shovel pass forward for 9 yards. But it's whichever the first game was that he really broke out with the 138 game. I just been very excited. That block to get catch up to Flowers. He's running a diagonal, and I know he's fast, but he's running a diagonal, and Flowers, who's one of the other fastest Ravens, is running straight up the sideline. I have to believe Flowers kind of let him catch him a little bit, but it's still incredibly impressive that Keaton Mitchell could get back and then make such an effective block twice, I believe, on the same player that really sprung him all the way.
And I saw his dad tweeted out that play as well. So he was as a former player, he was obviously very fired up by that particular display as well.
You know, it's the easiest proud dad moment of all because Anthony Mitchell has what was the biggest play in Ravens history prior to the Mile High Miracle in terms of championship value or in terms of a lot of things. Right. But it was it was a bigger play than Ray's interception to seal the game, was turning a field goal into 7 points the other way in that 2000 game. And it'll always be one of the greatest highlights. There's nothing Keaton Mitchell could do to get that number one spot unless somebody said it today, it involves confetti. But I thought it's interesting. Keaton Mitchell now has probably close to 9 of the top 10 Mitchell family plays in Ravens history already. And he's carried the ball, 15 times or something in his career.
Yeah. We're really talking about 3 games. Yeah. And I don't know. They also really seem to be onto something with the way they go from him to Edwards from series to series. I mean, I do think that's tough for defenses to account for. And you know, I wrote a little thing about Keaton Mitchell last week, and you know, I asked some of the Ravens defensive players about that. And I mean, that kind of change of pace thing can be a real thing. I think even if, you know, especially when it's as distinct as it is with those two guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm absolutely loving it. The other thing I'm loving is the way they're using him on draw plays. So they'll get him, the Browns pass rushers in particular, notorious for running themselves completely out of plays. If you'll think back, the Minnesota pass rusher Jared Allen, I always want to call him Josh Allen, but Jared Allen was famous for running himself out of run plays and not really caring if that was the case. As great as Myles Garrett is, the Ravens used Myles Garrett against Myles Garrett to get Keaton Mitchell a great draw play in that game. And it's just terrific to see them having that as an extra weapon to kind of slow down the opponent's pass rush, which otherwise, you know, with the tackle situation could give them a lot of trouble.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's been startling. Just the jolt that he's given the offense, I think, in multiple ways. When as many nice moments as he had in training camp, I don't think anybody was seeing him as like or at least not many people were seeing him as somebody that we would be talking about as an essential element to their Super Bowl chances. But it feels like it's not unrealistic to say that now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not unrealistic at all. The only thing I was saying about him from the very start was that he's the most critical player in camp for the 2024 roster at running back, because they have Hill signed, Edwards is not, Dobbins we figured was going for big money. Now it's even possible Dobbins would be back, but I think if I have to be honest about this, I think I have to say his chances are greatly reduced by Mitchell's play here the last couple of weeks. Yeah,
I know, I agree.
Let me go back to Lamar for a second, because he did face pressure 10 times in this game. That's 34% of the time. Got 74 yards on those plays, which is extremely good. And he's had this incredibly bouncy pattern, I'm using air quotes, from a high of 22.4 yards per play versus pressure to a low of minus 1.9 versus the Browns, so 22.4 versus the Lions. 7 is fantastic, by the way. Your normal average should be somewhere between 3 and 4 on plays where you're pressured. And he's been a much better passer under pressure this year than at any time previously in his career, including his MVP season. So I've just been tremendously impressed with that. And I think it's going to be one of the really big things about changing the narrative on playoff Lamar is how he deals with pressure and can maintain some effectiveness.
And you saw it right away in the game Thursday night. I mean, they on his first completion of the game, they pinched in on him. He steps right up in the pocket and makes a nice touch pass to Andrews on the sideline. And I mean, it's that, that didn't necessarily feel like a big deal in the moment. It's a fairly routine completion, but he did the right thing against pressure, and he made a positive play. And we've seen that a lot more this year.
Yeah, we have the second pass. Moses had a pressure against him, and he threw a 33-yard pass. I'm trying to remember what that was, whether that was a slant to Beckham or.
No, that was the Zay Flowers. He hit Zay in the middle of the field, and then Zay made that really impressive cut sort of to the outside and looped around a couple of defenders and added probably 15 yards to the play or something like that.
Yeah.
So that was a very good play by both quarterback and receiver.
All right, outstanding. We hit about everything. Okay, one of the things from this game, completed and intended air yards, always a big deal. But Lamar Jackson 6.9 and 12.2. 6.9 is not an exceptional number, but throwing the ball 12.2 yards downfield is quite good. And if you complete a good percentage of that, that's solid. But Burrow on the other side, 2.9 average yards of completion and 5.3 average yards of target. The Ravens were very effective in forcing the Bengals to play small ball yet again. And this is now about 5 consecutive games, maybe 6, where they've really forced the Bengals to do that and not let Burrow go down the middle of the field and get a bunch of completions against them.
Well, and Jamar Chase has become like a very ordinary receiver against them. I mean, it's those numbers are kind of remarkable because, I mean, he's, we think of him as one of the top 10 playmakers in the league, maybe. And he certainly has not been that against them this year. Now, I guess, I mean, we don't want to go too far down the road talking about the defense. I mean, I guess the flip side of that is they probably did not do as good a job defending small ball as they would have liked to in the first half. Certainly, I don't think it was a strong game for Queen or Roquan as coverage guys, dealing with Mixon and the tight ends. But that's a story for a different day.
Yeah, I agree. You know what? And again, I don't want to go too far on the defense either, but it's a great game of distributed effort to cover Jamar Chase. Like 4 different defensive backs had a play against him during this game that led to his 2 of 7 for 12 yards and the second lowest career total of yards he's ever had. Also, the second lowest career total of receptions he's ever had in a game. So,
I know you had Stevens as one of your defensive players of the game, but I mean, to me, if you had to pick the amazing story of the season from the Ravens, to me, it's Brandon Stevens, because I mean, everybody was worried about the secondary coming in. No one was talking about Brandon Stevens as being a cornerback who could stay on the field for every defensive snap. And now they can't take him off the field. I mean, I mean, he's as important or more important to what they're doing than Marlon Humphrey is. And it's just a remarkable leap over really 3 months.
Yeah, it's 98.6% of the snaps, leads all defensive players for the Ravens. He has not been taken off the field other than a little bit in garbage time to get him off. What do you think is a chance they end up signing him to an extension this offseason as one of their priorities? Because this is the first chance they'll have.
I would bet they'll try. Now, it'll be, I mean, that's a position where you can really get paid. So, I mean, he may want to say, well, I want to give it another year and, see if I can be one of the top cornerbacks on the market, the following year. So, but he's the sort of player that I would think Eric DeCosta would make a strong effort on. I mean, they always say that their first preference is to re-sign their own guys. And, he's a guy who maybe you could still get him a little bit under market after this year. So I would certainly expect the effort to be there.
Yeah. I like the idea, and I like the idea because usually those contracts are structured so he plays out the fourth year on his deal, and then you get a 1-year deferral on the cap, and then it's still a low cap number in that second year, and then by the time you get into the escalating years, it's a lower percentage of your total cap than it would be otherwise if you signed a free agent, right away. So I love the idea of doing it. I hope they're able to get it done. And I think there would be some divisible benefit on the table where Stevens would want a little bit less risk and the Ravens would like to get a little bit of value out of it.
Yep.
All right. I don't know if I said this already, but I did want to make sure of this. Lamar, while I thought, ran around behind the line of scrimmage pretty effectively, I thought when he got running into level 2, had a very odd game, efficient certainly in a sense because he was 9 for 54, so it's 6 yards per run, but his long run was only 8 yards. First of all, that's really hard to do, but the Bengals did a reasonable job of keeping eyes on him and making sure he didn't get away. And Lamar is very careful this game to slide down on some plays where we haven't always seen that from him.
Yeah, I thought it was a combination of things. I think part of it was him being more cautious. Part of it, he did lose his footing on a couple of those, and I wondered if he wasn't able to plant quite as hard as usual on the tender ankle. Now, he didn't say that after the game, but I did wonder if he lost his footing a little more easily than he might have because of that. And you saw him. I mean, he was frustrated on a couple of those runs. I mean, he did the thing where he sort of pounded the turf and felt, clearly felt like he left 3 or 4 yards on the table. That said, I mean, if you were worried about his ankle, I thought the way he ran the ball in the fourth quarter was very reassuring because I mean, on those option plays where he kept it, I thought his acceleration into the second level was really good and really confident. So. I mean, he certainly did not look like an injured player, making those runs to help put the game away.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a really great point. And the Bengals as a divisional opponent, they know him and they know they want to keep eyes on him. So you just don't expect the same number of 50-yard breakaway runs as he had that streak against the NFC East a few years ago, and I guess in 2020, where he had pretty much one big play against all of them, which is kind of cool. What else do you want to talk about here? Let's talk about the running backs and the snap division this game, because big migration of opportunity from Hill to Mitchell. So Edwards 25 snaps, Mitchell 24, Hill 17. No pony in this game. No two running backs in the backfield at the same time. So anyway, obviously Mitchell taking a big bite out of Hill's snaps.
Yeah, and we know the Ravens received a good bit of criticism, coming out of the previous game for Mitchell's, essential disappearance from the offensive game plan in the second half. I think John Harbaugh made it pretty clear when he talked to us on Monday that was not going to be the case going forward. That it's hard to. It's sometimes. I don't think they view sort of highlighting an individual player in a given game the way that fans view it. I mean, I think that they don't. It's so much more in the moment, and the game plan is what it is going in, and they have to make the reads that they have to make in the heat of battle. So I mean, they're not just going to say, "Oh, we need to get Keaton Mitchell the ball 8 times in the second half of this game. That's just not the way that it works. But it was clear coming out of that game that when they had viewed the film of it in retrospect, they didn't like the fact that he didn't have the ball in the second half either, and that the game plan was going to be changed going forward so that that wouldn't happen. And I think we saw the fruit of that in this game. He was a big part of the offense throughout, and it would be, to me, surprising if that's not the case going forward.
Yeah, game script also, you're effectively mentioning there in terms of the game has to play out how it plays out, and sometimes it makes sense. He's kind of legislated himself off the field in some ways with his pass blocking on third down, and he's a smaller guy, terrible pass blocker in college, just to be completely honest about it, and then made a really bad pass blocking mistake last week in the game, crossing the cone to make a block and basically impeding Lamar on a throw there. So there are reasons why Mitchell is not making it easy for him to be on the field every single play, but I still look at him as just this very special athlete, kind of like, I'm trying to think of, maybe Bo Jackson would be a guy that I would point to when he first came into Major League Baseball, and he would just do these. I mean, baseball is a very structured game. You don't get that many chances to make super exceptional plays. And he made him at bat. He made him on the bases. He made him in the field. He ran up outfield walls, all of the things he did when he first came into the league. And we're seeing that from Mitchell. I mean, Mitchell, breakaway speed, he's been used as a receiver already. He runs out and makes this block in this game, draw plays. And it's just, we're seeing the birth of something special, it appears like to me.
Yeah. My sense is that they certainly recognize that. And that, as I said, the game planning, I think, will reflect that going forward.
So Mitchell got the ball 9 out of 24 times as a touch in this game. Edwards 14 out of 25. He's very much a designated ball carrier and in there when the Ravens are going to run it and everybody else knows it. Hill just 2 out of 17 times. Now, part of that is being a pass blocking back that they want to have in there on those downs. And unfortunately, he's less likely to be an outlet receiver on 3rd and 10, to get the football, and he's very unlikely to get the ball as a runner in that situation. Yeah,
and I do wonder if the exchange troubles that he's had with Lamar have made them a little. I mean, that combined with Mitchell's emergence have probably hurt his chances of, being a ball carrier.
Yeah, I would agree. One thing, I've got to come back to one more thing about Mitchell, and this is part of the Bo Jackson thing that is just, he does amazing things. The guy has had 11 missed tackles forced on 20 career carries. I said 15 earlier. It's actually 20. That is an unbelievable rate. Like, the best guys in the entire National Football League are in the high 20s, and he's at 55% so far on 20 carries. Now, obviously small sample size. He shows incredible ability to me, really in terms of contact balance more than anything else, to run through tackles in level 2. And the Ravens, this is a good run blocking line, and they're going to create some level 2 opportunities for a player like Mitchell. Yep.
No, it's I mean, how often almost everybody on an NFL field is fast, right? Except for the guys in the trenches. So when you see a player come in who looks like he's 15-20% faster than almost everybody else, it takes your eye a minute to adjust to it. I mean, it's startling, right? Because you don't see it very often.
Yeah, it's been it's really something cool to see. I say, to have the Ravens have this guy for a change anyway. It did look a little grim for the 100-yard rushing streak to continue early in quarter 3. They didn't have a lot of yards. I think I looked up at the board and they had like 30 yards, with 25 minutes to go. Didn't look great. They finished no problem, 157, 5.1 per carry. But if you looked at how the game script might not have gone the way the Ravens want in the first half, especially, this is a team you can run on, and the Ravens really didn't.
No, they didn't. I did think they came out immediately with a nice run plan in the second half. I mean, Gus Edwards had the cutback for 26 yards, I think, on their first offensive play of the second half. So that sort of set the tone for what we were going to see. And Munkett, I think, showed some real nice variety with what he did in the second half. Not only rotating the backs, but different kinds of runs, different looks, interesting things with the offensive line when he would spread things out. Would have, I think there was a play where he had Collier as the tackle on one side, had Moses as the left tackle, and I mean we saw some interesting stuff with doing zone runs out of a more spread look, and they really seem to I mean you could say that the Bengals were sort of spiritually beaten at that point anyway, after they lose Burrow and everything, but I mean the Ravens really kept them off balance in the running game, I thought, in the second half, and also as we talked about earlier, leveraging Lamar as a running threat. So it was a real nice run package in the second half.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it was in that second half, they used the unbalanced line 5 times, 1 6-man line, but that's become now a staple of goal line play. And I really like that. The 2000 and let's see, 8, 9, 10 Ravens who had Haloti Ngata and would insert him in usually as a 7th offensive lineman, go with that, let McGahee run that little stretch play towards the strong side. And he would just pick his hole and go. McGahee had great field vision, by the way. All the he was still worth it on his contract, even when he wasn't getting a whole lot of yards for the Ravens, just because he was such a good touchdown scorer, a good 1 yard and 2 yard plunge guy. But then they finally decided they couldn't keep doing that to Ngata at one point. He ran a pattern against I remember the day exactly, the Denver Broncos on 10-10-10. That was the date. And he was out in the pattern. He did that about 4 times during the time he was out there on the field offensively, and he got hurt. And it was on the Ravens' first drive, and he couldn't start the game, so he missed the first play because of it. And then the practice was discontinued at that point in terms of what they do in terms of getting him on the field. So they hardly used him on the field again after that. Anyway, really good way to get Moses tucked inside McCary, but they're doing that a lot. Another thing was the set and chip blocks. They used kind of a lot in this game, and I think some of this was a deference to Hendrickson and the Hendrickson-McCary matchup, but they used 6 set blockers and 9 chip blockers, which is a fairly significant concession to your eligible receivers. Not nearly as much as they did against the Browns. Against the Browns, it was 1.12 eligible receivers per play they gave up. But this game, still being careful about not letting Lamar get hit from the blind side by Hendrickson in particular.
Yeah, and I know they used Ricard that way effectively a couple of times, but I was interested to see in your notes, actually not as much as you might think. He wasn't the dominant guy being used to do that.
That's right. It's 3 chips from Ricard. I saw some note about it, and there's obviously some definitional difference between the way PFF does and I do, but I had him for 3 chips and 1 set. And when a player chips and goes out, they may have a distinction of how long it is before they call it a blocking rep. But you're right. That's not. It's really not all that much, and it's a spate of other players. It's likely it's pulling a guard in that direction sometimes, which is not a chip, of course, but likely was there several times. It was Edwards a couple times. It was Hill a couple times. It was Mitchell once in the middle. It was honestly very spread out in terms of who was doing all the heavy lifting there.
Yeah.
The tight ends, we've got to talk about them because obviously they're going to have to take a larger workload coming off the injury to Andrews. Talk a little bit about the performances by Likely and Kolar in this game.
Yeah, Likely, I thought had a pretty good blocking game, and I do think he's made strides in that department. Certainly, I mean, everybody's talked about it. I mean, he was viewed as sort of a blown up wide receiver coming out of college, and I think he's had to become a better blocker just to get on the field, and he's done a nice job there. I think the worry is, and there's going to be a lot of weight on his shoulders now, is that he hasn't certainly has not made the impact as a pass catcher this year that they had hoped. And I don't think that's just in games. I mean, I think that was in training camp and has been the case in practice as well. I mean, I know a lot of your listeners will remember. I mean, he was really the breakout star of 2022 training camp. I mean, he was the guy we were talking about coming out of the summer, thinking he was going to force his way into the game plan, even though they had Andrews. He was that spectacular, and we just haven't seen much of that this year. And you pair that with, some of the little questions about the reliability of his hands. I mean, he's going to have to show he can do that. He's certainly going to have the opportunity now. He did pretty well when he had bigger opportunities last year. When he had to be in there as the guy last year, he had he had a couple of very good games in Andrews' absence. So, if you're looking for a reason to be excited, I guess that would be it. But I think this had been a pretty disappointing season for him to this point. So going to be interesting to see how it goes. And then Kolar, I mean, he had to me almost faded out of the Ravens' plans, either being, basically a special teams player or being inactive and, starting to think about, are they going to have to go and draft another tight end, in April because, maybe they move on from him because he hasn't shown much. Well, he's also going to have a bigger opportunity to change that narrative. So, but I think it's a very open question what they're going to do with these opportunities. I mean, yes, there's real talent there, for people to be optimistic about, how they might be able to step in, but I don't think you can say it's a guarantee.
No, it's not a guarantee, but the door is open. I mean, there are, 60 or so snaps per game, which now have to be filled by somebody who's not named Mark Andrews, and that will create some opportunity and 8 or so targets, and I'm probably slightly exaggerating that have to go to somebody else. So likely had caught 9 to 10 balls coming into this game, 0 for 2 in this game, which is obviously a little bit disappointing. I thought one of them he really could have caught. He was not quite on his leverage properly on the left sideline when the ball went by him.
Kind of went right through his hands.
Yeah. And the Kolar at least getting back on the board with a catch when he hadn't had even a target since week 1, and this is his first catch of the year, as you mentioned in our production meeting. It's just a good opportunity for him in particular, because he'd been getting only blocking reps at this point. So
right.
Vokolek, you expect him to be brought up to the 53, or do you think they'll start with practice squad elevations and not really bother with it to start with?
That's a good question. I haven't necessarily thought about that. I mean, they could really go either way. I mean, they're going to have a roster spot to play with. I guess part of it will depend on what the other, how the overall health picture looks, when they come back to practice at the beginning of next week. I think he'll be there on game day. But I don't know how they'll deal with it from a roster gymnastics standpoint.
Yeah. And it helps that, one of the things about having somebody signed off your practice squad is the player almost always comes to the team, unless he thinks the opportunity with another team is better, always comes to the team and say, hey, New England has given me a call. Do you guys want to bring me up to the 53 here before I sign with them? And, Will Holden is a guy, for example, who was signed off the Ravens practice squad. I know that happened, but I think they'd have that opportunity with Vokolek if they took a chance and left him on the practice squad for 3 elevations.
Yeah, I agree with that.
All right. Childs, always a great deal of fun talking football with you. We're going to come back for part 2 in a few minutes. We'll talk about the offensive line. We'll talk about a lot of the skill position players individually and what they did in this game. We obviously have spent a fair amount of time on Keaton Mitchell, so probably not him, but some of the other ones. And I think that'll be a lot of fun. Childs, first of all, tell folks where they can find your work and where they may be able to talk football with you online.
Yeah. I'm on X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it at just at Childs Walker, and then BaltimoreSun.com. All the stories. It's get the 5 things you learned about the game on the morning after every game, and then 3 or 4 pieces throughout the week. So that's it.
We're going to start the second show with you telling us how you take notes at a game or when you're on deadline. But I want to make sure we start the second part of this with that. Other folks out there, if you'd like to be on a film study short, hit me up. This is the perfect time. We got a 10-day break here before the Chargers. We have some of it's been used already, but then we have a week off with the bye. Hit me up with your ideas. I'd love to meet some more people and have you on for a short topic. And we try and keep your topic granular so we can figure out what makes a good discussion that might take about 15 to 20 minutes. Thanks again for listening, folks. Childs, thanks again for coming on.
We'll be right back, right?
We'll talk to you next time on Film Study.